Hey everyone, your host is fired up. It's time for another weekly reselling news recap. The reason I'm fired up is that I have been watching for the past few weeks different news stories of groups of people walking right into stores like Walgreens and Best Buy and Nordstrom and just taking whatever they want off of the shelves and walking right out with it without paying for it, stealing it, and then going somewhere else and selling it, and employees standing by and feeling powerless to do anything about it. And this is happening in the middle of the daytime in many instances. They're very brazen attacks. They're very traumatizing attacks for the people who experience them. Now, some people have, sat back and watched it and have said, yeah, it's wrong, but yeah, they're big companies and they could probably absorb it. That's not actually true. For example, Walgreens in San Francisco pulled out of a lot of their stores and shut them down because they can't absorb that type of shoplifting. So now, though, it has crossed into small businesses that we in the reselling community frequent. Particularly, there's a store in Chicago, a thrift store, consignment store, that just got hit up and lost $50,000 of merchandise from one of these mob attacks. And I'm going to play about a 1-minute clip from the store owner herself so you could hear in her words exactly what happened.
A guy came to the door, and just as I buzzed him in, I saw like a whole bunch of other guys dressed just like him come piling in.
The owner says around a dozen men came running in, grabbed as many designer handbags as they could, and ran out, jumping in cars, waiting outside, and drove away.
Hours later, and I'm still shaking. I'm in the middle of Lincoln Park. I've been here almost 30 years. I've never had anything like this kind of violence happen to me ever. We've had to put gates up, cameras up, buzzers up. I mean, and they're so brazen, nothing stops them. I'm a little small business owner. I'm not Gucci on Michigan Avenue. I'm just a little fish in the pond, trying to support my family.
And what's even worse is that at the time this story was written, no suspects were in custody. Now, as she said in the story, this is something that she had never experienced in the past, despite being in business for decades. So this is something that seems to be a new wave of crime, this organized retail theft that's surging across America, as you can see in this news title. Now, there's statistics in this article that say prior to the pandemic, about 29% of retailers reported a retail loss of at least $1,000 in merchandise. Since the pandemic, it's been about 50%. So there's definitely been an increase. For every $1 billion of sales, this is costing retailers about $700,000. So this is not sustainable. One of the other statistics that's in here, which is hard to believe, I mean, I couldn't imagine this. For every $330 worth of products stolen, a retailer has to sell an incremental $300,000 worth of goods to break even. That's absolutely crazy. Retailers across America say shoplifting is now 2 to 3% of their total sales. Pre-pandemic, about 1% or a little less than 1%. So why is this happening? Well, one of the reasons has to do with people are shopping for stuff online more. So as a result of that, there are criminals who are trying to obtain the items illegally. They're not reselling anything because they never bought it to begin with. It was never originally sold. The stuff that resellers buy, that you and I buy in the reselling community, it was sold to us. We bought it. So we may get some stuff for free, but that person originally bought it from somewhere, or it was created based on materials that they bought. This is out and out theft. It is not reselling. And I really want the media to stop calling it reselling. With the pandemic, there's been obviously a significant increase in the use of masks and facial masks. So that even allows criminals to be obscured more when they're walking into these stores. There's fewer employees that are there. So there's places that have completely wiped out their loss prevention department, or there's barely anybody there. Then there's fewer police officers to respond to the scene, so there's less investigative tools available. How does this stop? They talk about putting in more security devices. They're putting more things in glass cases. But at a certain point, do you want to walk into a store and shop around in a place like that? I mean, I really don't. Home Depot has gone to the lengths, like for some of their tools, that they've actually made it so that in order for the tool to work, it has to be activated with a checkout scan. But you can't do that with everything. It's not practical. There has to be some stronger laws in place to act as a deterrent. There obviously are a lot of social inequities at play that contribute to some of this. Parenting systems are broken. There's poor role models for people. Let me know what your suggestions are down in the comment section for sure. I definitely want to hear what you have to say. All right, now this next news story is pretty controversial, but I'm not going to shy away from controversy during this news recap series. So there's a thrift shop in Canada that decided to remove men's and women's categories and instead classify items based on the type of item that it is. So in this thrift store, for example, you are not going to see a men's and women's clothing section. Instead, you're going to see a section for shirts, and it's going to have what used to be called the women's shirts and the men's shirts all mixed together. Same thing for the shoes, same thing for the pants, and so on and so forth. So let me know what you think about this in the comments section. I actually was thinking about this a few days before this article came out, because I had this pair of jeans that you see here in my eBay store. This is Lee jeans. They were cut on the bottom in such a way that these can now be used as a women's crop style of jeans. But in terms of eBay classification, without paying extra for another category, I'm forced into putting it in the men's clothing jeans section. Now, I could have put it in women's, but the point is I have to pick a specific gender. And in reality, clothes actually do not have a gender. Clothes are not born with a gender. Yes, they could be stylized to fit a certain body type more than another, but in reality, gender really is a societal concept. And there's a great article that describes this. It came out this year. Yes, men used to wear dresses, high heels, and the color pink. So you could see here's a portrait of Prince Balthazar Carlos from Spain wearing a dress. I'm going to show you a pretty shocking photo right here. Check this out. You know who this is? Looks like a cute little girl, right? It's not. That's actually Franklin Delano Roosevelt, U.S. president, taken in 1844, in a dress, in long hair, and back then that was considered a gender neutral outfit. I'll give you another example. These are the Greek philosophers, and they used to wear these long tunics that, kind of look like dresses. High heels, believe it or not, it was not uncommon for certain men of certain social statuses to wear high heels. Great example of this would be Louis XIV. And if you can't see it clearly there, here it is a little closer up. Look at those high heel shoes right there. And then there's the color pink. Yes, real men wear pink. It used to be very common back in the day to wear loads and loads of pink, as you could see here from this picture of Pope Innocent X. These days, it's still fairly common to see guys wear some pink, particularly pink tie. Heck, I even have a pink tie that I wear every once in a while. Got to be a confident guy to wear a pink tie. There's nothing wrong with it, in my opinion. But the whole point of me showing you this is that our concepts of what we think is appropriate or not appropriate to wear is all based on where society is with gender roles at that particular time. Now, the reason that the thrift shop owner said that they're making this change is to be more inclusive for gender diverse clients. And while that could be a legitimate reason to make such a change, if people are feeling uncomfortable who are their customers, especially if they've heard that feedback, there are people who are not gender diverse clientele who also might feel uncomfortable. So For example, I've spoken to women who have told me I actually do feel uncomfortable when I'm shopping in a men's section because I feel like the guy's probably wondering, like, why am I over there in his section? And, that could be on the other side too. Are there guys watching this video who stay away from the women's section of clothes because they think the women might think they're a little bit creepy going over and looking through some of those clothing items? Yeah, I know there's some people watching this who just don't care and will just go in either section. I mean, that's me. I don't care. I'll just go wherever. But some people do, and maybe it's easier to have it more open up. I'll take you into the actual Facebook group of the store here, and you can see here they put a little article out on their Facebook group that says "Clothes have no gender," and someone said, "So will you be doing that with baby clothes and kids clothes? Seems awkward to most and harder when you're in a rush to look for the clothes you're looking for." And they responded by saying that it's not for children's clothes, which I have an issue with. If you're going to make this policy and you're going to do it to be more inclusive, then it should apply to children as well as adults. Shouldn't be one versus the other, especially since gender roles are obviously forming during childhood and many people are taking their children into the thrift stores with them. So that's number one. Now they respond to several customer feedbacks in terms of talking about it could be more difficult and challenging to find the items. And their response to that is, well, just let us know if you're having trouble finding things and we'll help you. I think that this is going to be something that you start seeing in a thrift store near you sooner rather than later. I also think I'm going to make a prediction right now that sooner rather than later, I'll say somewhere within the next 5 to 10 years, you are going to see eBay do away with men's clothing section and women's clothing sections, precisely for the example that I gave here. And it probably happen in other clothing sites online as well. Let me know. Do you think that's going to happen? How long do you think it's going to take? Do you agree with that? Do you think it should just stay as is? I'm not claiming I have the right answers, but I'm just telling you my thoughts on it. All right, now moving on to our next story. About 600 Amazon packages were found dumped near Oklahoma City. Now, I've seen this same type of story happen before with FedEx packages and with USPS packages. And what's happened in a lot of prior instances is that it has been a driver who is just overwhelmed with the amount of stuff they had to deliver and just decided to throw it off into a ditch or something like that. And when this story initially came out, that's what I was thinking might have happened. But then there was a follow-up story that came out which said actually what occurred here is that this was a conspiracy between a third-party Amazon driver and two other individuals to steal thousands of undelivered packages right before Christmas time. So that type of theft, again, it's not the same thing as walking right into the thrift store and taking all those items out, but it's a very similar type of thing and probably done for similar reasons to take this stuff and then try to sell it online. And I hope that these people face significant consequences for doing this. Again, hopefully as a deterrent for others who are even thinking about trying to pull off such a scheme. Moving on to our next controversial news story. Rapid COVID-19 tests are reselling for as much as $75 a pack, 3 times their normal retail price. The reason for this is they are in high demand and low supply. You could see this here yesterday where I live in Syracuse, New York. Cars backed up for more than a mile to get free COVID-19 tests at the New York State Fairgrounds. Now, where you have to be careful with this is that, yes, people are desperate for COVID tests. As this says here, people need the COVID tests to get back into their place of work, for example, to get their kids into school. It is considered a necessity during a pandemic. Whenever you're dealing with reselling something that is a necessity, you have to be very, very careful not to price gouge. So you have to be very well aware if you're going to sell this stuff. Now, you can't sell it on eBay because they are banned. You cannot sell COVID tests on eBay. But what people are doing is selling them on places like Instagram, Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist. Now, some of these places have policies discouraging that or against that, yet some of these posts are still making their way on there, or they're putting them, into local neighborhood chat groups and stuff like that. So you got to be careful because state attorney generals, including in New York and other places, have already put out statements to the public that if you feel that there's someone in the community who is price gouging on these kits, to report that person. And trust me, they will come down heavy on people who are doing this. Now, there is an article here which quotes a former person who worked for the FTC, so the Federal Trade Commission, to make a comment about the likelihood of someone taking action against somebody for reselling COVID kits. And what the person said here is that if someone is selling a small number, like a couple of dozen, a federal agency isn't going to bring action against someone doing this at that scale, especially if they're open about the price. Now, you can't take that as a given that the FTC won't do something about that, because that's a former person who worked there, not a current person. Also, I would also add to that you have to be careful about the prices. So if the current market rate is $25 and you're trying to sell it for $75 or $100, that's significantly higher than what it should be selling for. So you have to be aware of where the current market is if you're going to sell this stuff. Personally, I am not reselling any type of COVID test, COVID kits, or anything like that. It's just not worth the risk for me. I have so many other things to sell. That being said, I do think there is a role for resellers to be involved in selling this type of stuff, because what we can do is get stuff to people in a safe way. We can make safer delivery spots for people if we're getting it for them at a fair price. And yes, there's nothing wrong with making some type of profit. After all, the companies making these kits are making a profit. So you can make a profit. It just has to be a fair profit. Think about it. There's lots of people who are waiting in really, really long lines. Maybe they didn't have COVID before they went to get the test, and now they're waiting in this line to get a kit, and now they get COVID from someone else waiting in the line. So, if resellers could get access to some of these kits and be able to sell them to people at a fair price, put people in a less dangerous situation, get it to them faster, that's good. But as a buyer, as a consumer, you have to be aware of, that you're paying a fair price, and you also have to be careful about who you're dealing with. Use a lot of the normal checks that you would use to verify who you're buying from, to make sure you're not buying anything counterfeit or anything fraudulent. So that's very important as well. So let me know your thoughts about this. Again, I know it's very controversial and people are going to be all over the board. Just make sure you keep politics out of it. I don't want to hear any politics stuff, or I got to remove the politics. All right. Speaking of controversial figures, Elizabeth Holmes has been in the news this week due to her guilty verdict on several fraud charges. If you're not familiar with Elizabeth Holmes, she formed a company called Theranos that claimed to be able to do all of these advanced blood test techniques with a very small amount of blood. She valued her company at this insane valuation, and a lot of investors bought into it and were defrauded when she did not actually have the goods to deliver upon what she promised. And so that led to the guilty verdict, but she still has a subculture of people who follow her, who don't care about the guilty verdict and just like her for kind of being a bad girl, kind of like how someone would be a fan maybe of Cruella de Vil. And there have been some items this week associated with her that have resold for high prices on eBay. This is probably the week or two to put this stuff up, so look through your old magazines. If you have a old Fortune magazine with her on the cover, you're looking for around 2014. There was one that you could probably get a few $100 for. There was one from Inc. magazine that was 2015 that sold for 125. There's also been some people on Etsy who have created some things, t-shirts and cups and stuff like that have been selling. So people are going to have their fun with this, selling these types of items for the next week or so. But then after that, I think it's going to fade off as Elizabeth Holmes goes out of the headlines. If she pops back in again for some reason, like sentencing, they'll probably go back up again a little bit, but then it'll fade off. So you have to be aware of those trendy topics in reselling that are based on something going on in the news, and be ready to respond fast. Now, something that is been very popular for a very long time has been reselling comic books. And as you know, that's something that I specialize in my store and talk about often on this channel. So I was very happy to see that a very fine to near mint copy, a 9.0 graded by CGC of the Incredible Hulk #1, resold for almost $500,000 on Comics Connect. That's the highest price ever for an Incredible Hulk #1. And if you look at him right here, you'll see that he's gray. He was supposed to be originally gray. That's how Stan Lee wanted him, because he didn't want the Hulk to be identified with any particular race or ethnicity. So the problem, though, was in the 4-color system that they used to print with back in the day. It was very hard to get this color consistently. So what would happen is that when they tried to put the combinations together with the type of paper that we're using, he would come out as green. And then when Stan Lee saw it, he said, you know what? He actually looks pretty cool green. Let's keep him green. So then they kept him green. All right. Now, many people watching this are aware of the new tax reporting rule that if you are earning a profit in your business of $600 or more, that you are going to get a 1099-K form, and you are going to have to report that to the IRS. So some people have been trying to get around this by using apps like Venmo, Cash App, Zelle, that sort of thing. But be on notice that you are not going to be allowed to get away with that either. This is relevant to people in the reselling community, for example, who are reselling stuff on YouTube or on whatnot and using these types of apps. So the IRS has said that payments of $600 or more for goods and services through these types of third-party networks will now be reported to the IRS. So just be aware of that so you don't get in any trouble with your reporting of taxes owed. All right, now this is my favorite news story of the week because I love historical finds, especially if it's something that people thought was lost to history. So this has to do with a guy named Kevin Howes, who's a music historian who walked into a thrift shop in Alberta, Canada. He comes across this record in a mostly blank sleeve, although it has the name Cat's Eye written across the front, as you can see right here. And he buys it for 25 cents. He brings it back. He listens to it. He's like, wow, this is great. So he's looking at the LP label and he sees 9 different song titles on there. And he sees the word O'Kane on it. And he's like, who's O'Kane? And he's trying to research it. He's trying to figure it out. Years go by and he's still thinking about it. So he reaches out to this guy who you see here, Dwayne O'Kane. And he says, hey, did you ever make an album called Cat's Eye? And the guy's like shocked to hear from him. And he's like, oh my God, yeah, we did. We made it in 1973. And he goes on and he tells them the whole story about it. And other band members are still around. This is another picture of the album right here. They start reminiscing about it. And, he tells them the whole background about it. There's a little photograph here of Dwayne O'Kane and Lorraine Pilling. Lorraine Pilling wrote one of the songs. Dwayne Kane wrote the other ones. And they're like, maybe we could come up with a way to just bring this back to life, because there were only 99 copies that were originally made. And so as a result of this awesome discovery, now this album is available digitally. I'll put a link to it in the description section if anyone's interested in hearing it, and of the original article, so you could read the background about this a little bit more. And they're going to make a vinyl copy of it available too. Hopefully the guy who found it is going to get some kind of royalty for the discovery, but regardless, I'm sure he's happy to have made an awesome music historical find. Well, that's it, folks. It was a wild and crazy week. As I told you, lots and lots of great topics to comment on down below. So let me know your thoughts. I look forward to hearing from you. Make sure you hit that subscribe button up top if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you back at the next one. Take care.